Hello and welcome to episode 292 of the Total Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. A huge thank you to our TSP Patreon community because we couldn't make the show each week without your support. Chris joined the Bobby Stokes tier today, and thanks also to Walter Horn who donated to us through Patreon. So thank you both for your support and your love this week. Coming up this week on the podcast, defeat at Arsenal, but it wasn't as bad as we expected. Plenty of talking points from the 3-1 loss. And a tasty little run of fixtures starts after the international break with a home game against Leicester. We'll preview that one later. My name is Martin Starke, and I'm joined on this episode by the usual suspects. Steve Grant is the owner of Saints Web. Glen Cour is writer of the blog League 1-10. And Alfie House is senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. So let's get into it. 3-1 the final score at the Emirates, but I've written down, if I was doing a one-word review, Glenn, I've written better. I mean, 2 away defeats this week, but 2 very different performances.
Yeah, it was definitely a better performance. It's not hard to be better than the Bournemouth performance, let's be honest. And there was basically restored a bit of pride in the team. I mean, you know, I was ready to put my foot through something last week. But, you know, this week you came away at the end of the game thinking, yeah, we actually did okay there. You know, it's a little bit too much to ask to, you know, get points out of the game. But I think overall we put in a decent performance, and it just restored a bit of faith in the players and the manager a little bit. But I mean, the bottom line is we lost again. But yeah, it was a step in the right direction, but we've had these before. And whilst, you know, that old thing about defeats away at Arsenal, bearing in mind we always lose there, they don't define your season. You know, it's a kind of an honourable defeat this time, but, you know, we're going to get onto the Leicester game. We now get into the stage where that has to be a result. We can't have another, oh yeah, we've made a little step in the right direction, but we've lost again. You know, we really do need to get some points on the board, and quickly. But overall, I came away from the game thinking, you know, we did okay there. And when you play at Arsenal, you need to get a result. You need everything to go your way. It didn't quite, and I'm not blaming the referee, but he didn't help. I didn't think he was very even-handed with the way he refereed, especially in the first half. It's interesting that we're playing Leicester next because when they were playing Bournemouth the weekend and they had a goal disallowed, Bournemouth did, where a cross came into the box, someone who was offside went for it, didn't get a touch, and it bounced into the net, and that got disallowed. And it's kind of similar to the second goal we let in. We needed that to go in our favour, and it didn't. Yeah, and you know, at 2-1 down, we hit the post, we hit the bar. So overall, it was not too bad. The third goal, yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's but that's, you know, we're pushing up at that stage, and that can happen against a team as good as Arsenal are. But overall, I actually quite enjoyed watching it, unlike the Bournemouth game, which was awful. I mean, we still made mistakes. There was a little bit too much suicide ball out from the back. It could have been horrible. The first 20 minutes, we gave the ball away kind of 5 times running without getting out of our own half, trying to play out. So it could have gone a bit wrong. But once we got past the first 20 minutes, stuck in the game and got to half-time relatively comfortably. There was a couple of shots at the end of the first half. And that was it. So, you know, defensively, it was a massive step up from what we had against Bournemouth. Particularly impressed with Jan Bednarek yesterday, because he kind of went missing against Bournemouth. But yesterday he was front and centre of everything. So I think the partnership with him and Harwood-Bellis was decent. But yeah, Mr. Sugawara is some of his defending leaves a little bit to be desired. But yeah, they're fine points that need to be sorted out before it. You know, we play the Leicester game, the Wolves game, and whatever other sort of 6-pointers we've got coming up. But
yeah, there's a few.
Overall, I came away, you know, reasonably happy with the performance.
The one that nobody saw coming, Alfie, was Ryan Manning back into the starting lineup. Just talk us through that back 4, back 5, and the decision around that.
Yeah, well, I don't think Russell Martin saw Ryan Manning coming back into the starting 11 until Saturday morning either, because it was actually Ryan Fraser who was set to start the game in a role similar to what I suppose he did at the playoff final and did very well. Obviously, he had a disaster at Vitality, but who didn't? So it was going to be a case of, the two of them would double up on Bukayo Saka, who's obviously Arsenal's biggest threat. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. When he was struck down Vilnius, Ryan Manning was the next best option, and I thought he did the job pretty well. He was more advanced than Carl Walker-Peters. I'd probably had them the other way around. There was times where Ryan Manning was up on the halfway line, looking to get forward as well. But they did a good job. I think although he ended up getting obviously 2 assists and the goal, and he's the key man and the fantasy points and all that, he actually was limited to fairly little in the first half. And I mean, that first half is one of the most one-sided sort of games I've ever seen. But it didn't feel like that meant Arsenal should have been winning. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't have too much. I think we dealt with the set piece as well. They were, they were slightly more pragmatic. Southampton. They did a really good job, kept it to 0-0 at halftime. So yeah, it was a surprise to see Ryan Manning come back in. I don't think it necessarily means he then starts the game against Leicester. I think it was just a specific sort of tactical change by design for the opposition. And, Russell Martin made some changes for the opposition on Monday at Bournemouth, and they went horribly, horribly wrong. And I was the first person to criticise them, and not the only person. Everybody I've spoken to felt the same way about that system. So you have to give him credit for when something does go slightly better, and it did. I think the changes he made were good. I would like to see us go back to that 4-2-3-1, that slightly more attacking variant for the key games that Glen mentioned. But they did well. They came up with solutions to a system, and they could well have got some in. I think Cameron Archer will be really pleased to get a first goal. Good finish. When he joined, I think we felt that he could sort of dovetail on the left with Ben Brereton Diaz come inside and Cameron going out to the left. Obviously, he's decided that Ben Brereton Diaz isn't allowed to leave the touchline, so it won't be him at this point. But if it's someone like Tall Paul, who I'll leave for Steve to talk about, I imagine, it could be Cameron Archer goes out on the left and makes way for someone like that. So, yeah, I think we saw things that I liked about Saturday. I left that, I felt Saints were disappointed, but they didn't disappoint.
It was a more defensive mindset than we've seen before, Steve, wasn't it? And obviously, as Glenn said, we managed to hold out until half time. We had to deal with not having a lot of the ball, which was different for us.
Yeah, although we were still trying to play the same way, sort of out from the back. And the thing that I found a little bit frustrating in that first half was how quickly we were trying to play the game. So when on the rare occasion we actually got the ball, or the ball went out of play and we had a goal kick or whatever, we were desperate to get the ball back in play really, really quickly, which you kind of think in a game like this, that's exactly what Arsenal want.
I think you said last week that you were predicting a lot of time wasting, weren't you? And a lot of
it's fascinating that's not what we were doing. I was just thinking, I mean, surely every goal kick has got to take like 40, 50 seconds to be released. I think there was only one just before half time where Ramsdale went long, and we probably took 30 to 40 seconds to get that one back in play. But all the others were done pretty quickly, but we were happy to do so. And like free kicks, we were winning. I mean, on the rare occasion that Tony Harrington deemed to give us something our way, presumably someone had just been decapitated at the point he finally gave us a foul. We were like, we pick the ball up, put it down, and play the short pass quickly. It's like, come on, lads, give yourself a chance in this game, because otherwise you're just going to run out of steam. You're going to be absolutely exhausted. But yeah, I mean, defensively, I think realistically, when you go, especially when you go away to these sides, at home it's a little bit different. You can possibly set yourself up to have a go a little bit more, but away from home against the big boys, and we'll find that out in a few weeks' time at City as well. I think you've got to be a bit more pragmatic. And I mean, Russell Martin has never kind of shied away from doing that when he's needed to. It's not this sort of ridiculous dogma that people suggest with him, where he's absolutely wedded to one formation, one lineup of 11 players, one way of playing. I mean, I think the sort of way of playing is probably the more fixed of the three, but even then there are variations on that, as we have seen. Like even just this season, we've played at least 3 different formations already this season to start games. And yeah, so you've got to have a little bit of flexibility. And I think everybody would fully accept that you go into this sort of game, you've got to set yourself up to be solid. And I mean, the fact that Aaron Ramsdale didn't have a shot to save until the 44th minute shows we kind of got that right, I think. I mean, a few little ricochets went our way, but when you got that many bodies back in the penalty area, that tends to happen, I think. So yeah, first half absolutely fine. Would have liked to have. It was interesting the substitution he made when Stewart got injured, because given Onuachu was on the bench, I did kind of wonder whether he might have been the more suitable replacement, sort of immediately. I mean, maybe the question is whether he's got an hour in him at the moment, which I mean, maybe he hasn't. But certainly where we were looking to fire the ball either into Stewart's chest or into his feet, where he was dropping short for it and trying to hold it up and then relieve a little bit of the pressure. Cameron Archer coming on is obviously a very different centre forward. He wants to play on the shoulder and he wants balls into the channel. So that was why basically the last 15 minutes of that first half, we ended up being another 10 yards deeper, because there just wasn't an outball for us to even have a chance of getting up to halfway, let alone into Arsenal's half. But second half, we seemed to feel our way into it and found a way of kind of opening up space a little bit. I think Arsenal tried to kind of stretch the game a little bit more, which kind of helped us in terms of counter-attacking, because it left more space for us to get into. And I mean, Raheem Sterling finding himself in a sort of defensive midfield position meant that we could get a little bit of strength on him, win the ball back, and suddenly we were turning the other way, and that's where the goal came from. The only big disappointment really is that we held the lead for barely 2 minutes. And I mean, one thing that's quietly gone under the radar, I think, this season, sort of with the step up, is that, I mean, we noticed it 1 or 2 times, I think, last season, where teams that pressed us in a certain way, Flynn Downs really struggled to cope with the pace of it. And that's one thing I've kind of noticed in quite a few games. There's been a few where kind of games have almost passed him by and he's making sloppy mistakes that he wasn't making last season, because, I mean, you basically get a fraction of a second less on the ball to make the decisions. And I mean, obvious thing that he had his best game against Ipswich, because it's essentially another Championship team who were pressing at Championship pace. So he had enough time to make those decisions on when to play those little passes through the lines and things like that. Whereas obviously he gives the ball away for the equaliser. And if he had a fraction of a second more, he'd have probably actually retained the ball rather than trying to pass it left, because there was a clear route for him just to dribble straight on up the pitch at that point. We'd worked ourselves out of a tight little hole, but then you give the ball away in that situation when you've only got literally your back 4 behind you, and there's 3 attackers running onto you. Yeah, you're banging trouble. And side like Arsenal were unlikely to pass up that opportunity, unfortunately.
We need to talk about the mistakes and we need to talk about the strikers, but Glenn, I just want to talk about the core, like Joe Aribo coming back in. It looked like, I know he started a few games at the start of the season, then he found himself out of the team. He was one of the few names that Russell Martin mentioned after that Bournemouth game. It looks like suddenly you've got Bednarek, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, you've got Joe Aribo sitting in front, you've got Aaron Ramsdale. There's that kind of like that core, and these should be the team that he sticks with going forward if they're all on top form.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought Joe Aribo against Bournemouth proved he was a better option than Leslie Oguchukwu at the moment to play next to Flynn Downs, basically. I mean, Aribo only really has had one bad game. It was a Brentford one. He wasn't great in that, but he was a little bit unfortunate, I thought, to get left out, because he was left out for Oguchukwu, and we obviously hadn't seen much of him he's on loan from Chelsea, so I think that was made in a bit of blind faith. But Aribo's come back in, and I thought he was excellent the second half against Bournemouth, and he would be a very good candidate for man of the match from yesterday. I thought as well. I just thought he was good. He's just, you know, we're going to talk about redemption of other players, but I mean, when you consider what Aribo was like 2 years ago, when he just looked slow, looked unfit, seemed to get knocked off the ball, didn't seem to make up his mind quickly enough what to do. It's just a massive difference.
It was the Cup of Nations, wasn't it? He came back and he was just like a different player. Yeah,
I mean, he's obviously, you know, like they all have, because he's got it in him to have a bad game, as all our players have. Otherwise, they wouldn't be playing for us. But I think as it stands at the moment, he brings, you know, you're looking for someone to partner Flynn Downs in the centre of midfield, basically, and he's probably the strongest option in terms of physicality. He also looks after the ball pretty well. So, and he certainly looks a lot quicker than he did a couple of years ago. So I know, you know, ultimately Will Smallbone will get himself fit and be an option there. You've got obviously Big Les as well. But to me, Aribo looks like the best option at the moment, and that was a very good game from him yesterday. I expect him to stay in the team now, to be honest.
The other name that got mentioned after the Bournemouth game, Alfie, was obviously Ross Stewart. We thought he might start. He did. Another injury, and it's just heartbreaking to see him subbed yesterday and another injury.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say about Ross Stewart is that I've seen a few sort of comments about it, and I think there is obviously frustration that you've spent £9 million on a striker who can't play for you. But there is obviously there's a human there who has spent the last 2 years on the sidelines. I don't know how much work they do to get back, but I know it's a lot. Having spent time with Amo-Ameyaw, they're in more than their teammates. They're in basically every day of the week, working hard to get back. It's obviously physically painful as well as it is mentally. And he's finally back. He's had a long journey playing in sort of lower leagues and in Scotland, and he's finally become a Premier League player. Got his first start at a club like Arsenal. And he only lasts 27 minutes. And I think Russell Martin said it's a muscle injury. It's a new muscle injury. And, I think they sort of think it might be a bad one. So that's been scanned today. I don't know the results of that. I'm sure we'll find out in a couple of weeks before Leicester. But, when you have injuries like that Achilles one, then the hamstring, you're compensating on different muscles, and, it's a recipe for future injuries. So, hopefully he's okay. I can't imagine what it felt like to go into that dressing room on his own and know that he's got another, however long it is ahead of him. So they've lost an option there, unfortunately. And I think they've taken as long as they could. They've been as careful as they could with his recovery. He played 2 games in November last year, played 2 games in May, and he's only now making his first start in October. I think in pre-season he didn't go to Spain. They took as long as they could with him. Really, it's just one of those things. So yeah, they've lost an option in Ross Stewart, but I'm glad to take the horns. They've gained one in Paul Onuachu, it looks like, who, as sort of mentioned, it did feel like the more natural fit coming on for the 27th minute, but there's still a pecking order there, right? And I don't think that Paul would have come on at all had Ross really sort of not gone off and sort of they lost that profile. So Cameron Archer for me is still the next guy in the order, but Paul comes on and his first touch not amazing, but after that he's doing step overs, stop and turns, he's beating William Saliba, and he looks like a different beast, and that's what Russell Martin called him. Russell Martin said that since the window has shut, he has been a different beast in training. Everybody knows what happened last year. They had to get rid of him on loan because of financial reasons for start, wages, and a small loan fee from Trabzonspor, which was a pain to actually get paid, but it did in the end, I'm pretty sure. And also he probably didn't want to play in the Championship. But he's now got a chance to play in the Premier League, and why not use him? However long it takes, whether he goes in January or the summer, he looks like an option, and he's something different. They tried to get one ball into the box. I think he didn't quite reach him, but the fact that he can play with his feet and can actually take players on and progress the ball, that's the bit where people sort of doubt him because he's 6'7" or whatever. But he can do it against Arsenal. He can do it against anyone. So yeah, I think it's really exciting for Southampton. Whether he goes and starts the next game or not, I don't know, but he's definitely an option.
It was a joy to watch, Steve, to be honest. I mean, this would be the biggest redemption arc ever, wouldn't it? And I mean, to be fair to him, he's scored goals literally everywhere he's been, apart from here. So there is a great player in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have discussed this 18 months or so ago when we were in the middle of that horrendous non-battle against relegation. But like the handful of top chances. I mean, how many actual crosses did we put into the box for him in that time? I think 3. One of which he hit the bar, and one of which he headed narrowly wide against Chelsea. So you put the ball in good areas for him, and there's always a chance. I mean, he's going to out jump pretty much anybody you would imagine. And yeah, it's all about giving him the right service. And yeah, people will say, well, the system that we play doesn't really call for a big lanky striker that you lump the ball up to. But we're not going to lump the ball up to him, obviously, because that's not what we do. But it just gives you an option. That if you're a goal down in the game, or if you're a goal up, I mean, goal down, you're obviously chasing the game. Your delivery into the area can be a lot more speculative because you've got that kind of chaos factor, and he's occupying at least 2 defenders, you would imagine, more often than not. And if you're defending a lead, then last 20 minutes, who would you want? Like if the ball, if you're defending on the edge of your area, ball comes in, cross gets booted away by a centre back. Who would you want holding the ball up on the halfway line to relieve a bit of pressure and bring a potential counter attack into play? I mean, it's 6'7", 6'7" guy who's absolutely massive, who's just going to terrify defenders, you would think. And it now does give us that other option. I do certainly agree with Alfie that Archer is ahead of him in the pecking order. And yeah, I mean, excellent finish yesterday, and that's kind of the finish that we've kind of been hoping for in the previous games, and we kind of hoped that him getting off the mark in the Premier League for us is now kind of Shea Adams-esque.
The ketchup
even
bottle.
Even if it's short term, you get 2 months of goals out of him, and suddenly there's perhaps we're into double figures in points, and everything's actually looking quite promising. It's you never quite know how these things are going to go, but as I say, like we discussed it, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, the Ipswich game. Archer impressed apart from his finishing, and yesterday he found the finishing touch.
Great goal
against the best, either the best or the second best team in the country. A defence that doesn't really concede goals, and yeah, he made them look fairly silly there, I thought. So yeah, fair play to him, and it's good that he didn't let the sort of misses in the previous games kind of affect his confidence, because I mean he's now been at 2 teams in red and white who have been anchored to the lower reach of the table for 18 months. So it must be kind of a little bit soul destroying for a centre forward to have relatively little service. But if we can keep giving him the service that we have got him, then I mean, if we're getting yesterday's finishing more often than not, then he'll score goals for us. I'm still certain of that.
Ultimately, Glenn, I know you mentioned it, we're still heading into the international break without a win, so all the noise is going to continue. I think the mistakes will be the thing that a lot of people are talking about, and it must be so frustrating for the coaches, because you can talk about lineups all day long, but when you've got what have been decent players making silly mistakes, still, it's just going to cost you.
Yeah, individual mistakes will always cost you. It doesn't matter how good you've been previously, or the strength of the opposition. I mean, the first goal was incredibly frustrating, as Steve has said. I would like to see us change the way we approach things once a goal has gone in. You remember last week we said, once we're behind, we've got to start playing forward quicker and put more pressure on the defence. It's like once we're ahead, we've just got almost spend 10 minutes making sure we're not giving anything away. So don't play a stupid sideways pass and you're on the edge of your own penalty area. It was just so needless to give away that goal, because even if he, I know he's not going to do this, but even if you boot it off for a goal kick or put it in the stand, just let everybody calm down and sense that there's danger around if you give the ball away in this particular area. I just like us to think a little bit more and play the match situation more. If it's 0-0, okay, that's the way you're told to play, so you play that way. But just read the situation a little bit more. And the second goal, already touched on it, that on another day that might be given offside because Marino goes for the ball. I mean, to me, the rule always used to be if you went for the ball, it would be given offside. But they've tried to obviously make it clearer now, and it's virtually, unless you touch the ball, we're not going to give it. But not always, obviously. So it's kind of got worse. But the thing I noticed about the second goal is Sugawara, who is the right back, just had, if you watch the replay, he didn't look round once at where Martinelli was, had no idea where he was. And it's, if you're the right back, the left winger is your man. And he was just ball watching, basically. It's a really poor bit of defending. The third goal, I have a little bit more sympathy with Sugawara on, because obviously we're in crisis recovery mode and everyone's just flying in trying to, we've been caught on the break sort of thing. But I mean, it was a good pass he played to Saka, and decent finish. But you could tell that he did not realise that Saka was there, because he didn't. There wasn't a moment where he thought, "Oh my God, I've got to dive in here and try and get in the way." And Saka just rolled it in, and so it was unfortunate. So I think in summary, the first goal is the one that annoys me most, because we should just be setting up to be solid at that point. Give it 5-10 minutes and not give anything away at all. Because it was obvious our goal was going to make them angry. But it was just so, if they score a brilliant goal, then fair enough. But it's just, and it's a great finish, to be fair. And that's the difference between Championship and the Premier League. Might have got away with it in the Championship, giving the ball away there, but it was a brilliant goal by Havertz. And but it was just so preventable. And that is always, we're talking about struggling at the top end of the pitch, and obviously that's if you're struggling at the other end as well, and you're giving away silly goals, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Doesn't look good. Before we do Player of the Week, anything else on Arsenal?
Well, I think it was positive that Tyler Diblin did well again. I mean, obviously we talk about it every week, don't need to go on about it, but just thought he did well, which is nice, because that's probably the biggest test he's had so far.
Do you want to put him down for your Player of the Week? There's a few, actually, isn't there? We've
a
few names already.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm nominating one, I'd nominate Jan Bednarek personally, because I think he was the best player this week.
Yeah.
I'm sure Glen was thinking that as well.
Let's ask him, Glen.
Yes, I would agree. Jan Bednarek. I thought Joe Aribo was good. Matías Fernandes again. I just,
for the goal, great as well.
Yeah, for the goal, but he shows what we don't do enough. He wins the ball. He wants to be positive. He shows intent. He passes the ball forward. Gave Archer, as Steve said earlier on, gave Archer exactly the sort of ball that he wants. And I got great faith in this kid already. He does read the game situation. Because I'm sure if it had been Paul on at that stage, he wouldn't have played that pass. He'd have probably fizzed it into his feet or his chest or whatever. The guy seems to have, just so much football intelligence, sees the pictures around him. And another thing Steve said a few weeks ago, people will be noticing him. They'll be noticing Tyler Diblin, but they'll be noticing him as well, even though he's probably not as spectacular, but just the way he plays football, the way he sees things. And I mean, I love the fact he gets stuck in as well. Said that before, for such a slight lad, he's going to be some player, and we've got to build a team around these guys to make sure that we get the best out of them. And we've got to get the best out of all our players. I mean, Paul, there's no point in playing him if we're not going to put crosses in. There's no point in putting balls for him to run onto. He's never going to get there. We've got to be a little bit more clever with what we're doing, and play the game situation and use all our players to the best of their ability.
I should also say on that goal, mine. I mean, I was directly opposite the away end from where I was positioned in the press box, and I know that Matty Fernandes and Cameron Archer, I mean, their celebrations were actually massive. They wheeled away. I mean, obviously Cameron Archer did his sort of thing. For the fans as well, it was unbelievable viewing. It was a real head loss moment. It's just a shame, like Glenn said, it only lasted for a few minutes. It
didn't count for anything. Steve, any other names for Player of the Week from you? I think we've pretty much covered all the standouts, haven't we?
Just in terms of sort of expectation, Ryan Manning, I thought did absolutely everything that you could have asked of him in that position. Him and Walker Peters doubled up on Saka brilliantly for the majority of that first half. I think he got the better of them once, maybe. One cross that was kind of fizzed over with his right foot fairly early on. But for the most part, they had him relatively quiet. So I mean, it only kind of fell apart once he had to go off. I mean, it was fair enough that he had to go off around the 70-odd minute mark because he's barely played any football this season.
Yeah,
you can see him stretching out for a little bit before that. So yeah, no particular issues there. But yeah, I thought he was excellent for given the sort of short notice call up and probably the expectation level. I would imagine.
Great. Before we move on to the Leicester preview, I just want to say we're going to do some shout outs for anybody who leaves us a rating and a review on your podcast app of choice. We did this last year. We haven't done it for a while. You don't even have to say anything nice. I mean, it does help if you do. It's always grateful. It's always nice to read and nice for us to share. We'll give anybody who's left us a new rating and a review a shout out on the next podcast, which I think is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So 5-star reviews. Lovely. Thank you very much. So after the international break, we're back at St Mary's, Leicester City, the visitors, and I'm pleased to say that Reedy from Leicester Fan TV is joining us to preview this one. Evening, Squire, how are you?
I am good, thank you. How are you?
Good, yeah, no, all right. I mean, Leicester got their first win of the season yesterday, a win over Bournemouth, an important win for the manager, do you think?
Very important for the manager with how the fans have been looking at him the last few games and saying that he needs to be gone already. It is a big win for him, and obviously the pressure's now kind of gone off him now. And before today's games, we were only 1 point behind Man U, so it looked a bit more positive. But then again, Man United are doing absolutely rubbish at the moment. So
yeah. It's a low bar, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
What have you made of Steve Cooper? Because I know that was a name that was linked with lots of jobs. I think his name was mentioned for Southampton at the time, and it seemed like a really shrewd appointment in the summer. But I know the fans have been a bit kind of split, haven't they?
Yeah, and I've been one of the ones that have kind of criticised him for certain things, his late subs, his tactical decisions as well in games, and I think there's areas where you could say he probably is the right man to keep us up, because obviously he did it with Forest. But then on the other side, when we were in the Championship last year, you instantly saw a style and a philosophy and how we wanted to play. And this year, I still don't see the style we want to play. It feels like we're kind of using Enzo's system but changing it, and it's just looks like it's gone backwards in a way. And that's why I don't feel like we've got as many wins as we have. But again, I get the other side. Because I get the other side of it about Cooper saying that he is trying to stay in games where we've not lost massively yet, and it's competitive. We're staying in the game, but we've not won games yet. And obviously, until yesterday, which again we struggled, but we managed to get through it, and it was good to get the first win of the season.
Second half.
Sorry, Steve, I missed that.
Bournemouth had a lot of chances second half, disallowed goal, hit the woodwork. But it's one of those ones where you kind of look back on it and a horrible, scrappy 1-0 win. It's kind of almost, I mean, it's Steve Cooper 101, isn't it, really?
Yeah, again, it wasn't the most prettiest performance in the second half. We were decent in the first half, but the second half, yeah, it wasn't pretty. We kind of asked for the issues. The moment the second half whistle blew, JJ on the right hand side was getting absolutely pelted by the new wingers that they brought on, and it just wasn't great to watch. And that's kind of one criticism I have on Cooper, saying he just doesn't change things. He's not proactive. He's always reactive to what the other team are doing, and it means that we're just late to everything that they do. So again, that's probably one reason why we haven't got as many points as we have already.
I mean, you'll be looking at the next run of fixtures the same way as we are, I guess. You've got some winnable games because you've got, obviously, the Southampton game coming up. Then you've got Forest and I think, is it Ipswich as well?
Yeah. Yeah, the next 3 or 4, I said before, when we lost to Arsenal, and then obviously including the Bournemouth game, we were saying that we've got 4 games now where we've got to get points. And I said out the 4, we've got to get 9 points. And people are saying, no, that's like top 8 sort of standards. But in the next 3 games now, we've got teams where if we want to be staying in the league, we've got to be beating. And obviously that it does include you, which again, I don't want to be saying that while I'm on this show, but it is one where we've got to say we've got to get the points against you.
Glenn, I mean, we need to take the learnings from Bournemouth and Arsenal into this one, because we talked about the fact that your season isn't going to be defined by how you get on at the Emirates, but it is when you're at home against a fellow team that have come up.
Yeah, that's true. And we've already had the Ipswich game at home, which we didn't win. Leicester, we played them twice last season and got absolutely smashed both games. So it's certainly not going to be easy, but no game's easier in the Premier League, but some games are slightly easier than others. You'd rather be playing Leicester at home than Arsenal away. So, we lost twice to Ipswich as well last year. So, we've got to go into this game and be positive. And it's not just take the learnings from the last two games. It's, take the learnings from the four before that as well, because there were some good parts to those games as well, but we just haven't managed to string it together for a 90 minutes yet. And that's what we need to do. We have to go into this game and be positive from the start. I mean, I look at Leicester's team, and last year at St Mary's, it was the wingers that destroyed us. Probably in both games, actually. Mavididi at St Mary's in particular was excellent. So we got to look after them. I mean, Jamie Vardy, everyone knows about. I think he's about as old as me now, but he, he's still got something. But it's kind of indicative of a lot of teams down near the bottom that he is still Leicester's centre forward at the age that he is. I mean, I think he's been a fantastic player over the years, and if he played for us, I'd absolutely love him. But he shouldn't be playing as up front on his own in the Premier League at 37, 38, whatever he is. So it's a game that we certainly do have to target to win, and we'd have to target it for a win, even if we won 3 games already. And that's the problem with only having 1 point. We absolutely need to get started. I mean, I think there was five teams that hadn't won a game before this weekend. Leicester have obviously won one now.
Yeah.
So we have to get going. A couple of wins would make everything look so much better. But if we can't beat Leicester, and then we can't beat Wolves in the next home game, we've got to hope Gary O'Neill keeps his job until that one. Then it is going to be a hell of a long road back if we're going to get anywhere this season. So, yeah, Leicester's huge for us.
We saw some good stuff, Alfie, against Ipswich, and then he kind of changed the team for Bournemouth, and that didn't work out. We've seen some good stuff for Arsenal. I'm conscious of the international break. He's got a lot of time to think about this. Are we going to see Maxwell Cornet up front with Tyler Dibbling, or surely he's not going to throw us a curveball with the lineup again?
No, I mean, it's a good point, because they had 9 days between the Bournemouth game, didn't they? So
yeah,
you wonder sort of what thinking had gone on there. Russell Martin is a manager that learns. I think he makes mistakes, and he's honest about that. But I do think he tends to learn from them. And I'd be very surprised if he comes up with something wacky this time. To be totally honest with you, I think the blueprint is probably there to play against one of the fellow promoted teams. The thing about Leicester is you've scored a few goals, Reedy, haven't you? I mean, you've got goals all over the pitch, it seems like. I know Glenn sort of mentioned the fact that your striker's 57, but like they have a few players who can pop up with something. And that does worry me a little bit. But the focus has to be about what Southampton can do. And the managers always say that, but I feel like sometimes this season that hasn't been the case with the way the team's lined up and the players are being used. So take that on board, his own advice, and make it about Southampton. Put the best players in the right place. Tyler Dibbling obviously on the right, whether that's Amo-Ameyaw on the left or whoever it is, and try and take the game to them. And you've got 2 weeks to think about it. It's not a case of you've got 2 weeks to work on it, because they're going to lose half the squad to the international break. We say this every time, so it's not a case of that. Maybe they'll have a bit of time off as well in that. But yeah, it should be interesting to see what it comes up with, given maybe some of the previous records.
Steve, where are the atmosphere is going to be interesting, isn't it? I was just thinking, if we get an early goal, then that's great. But also the last kind of like few minutes, we've seen us throw that game away against Ipswich. It's just going to be tense all round on that Saturday.
Yeah, it will be, and I think that'll be the case in both ends of the ground. And it was against Ipswich. I mean, didn't hear a peep out of them second half for the most part, because they didn't look like scoring up until the point at which they did. But yeah, I mean, it's always one of those ones where you want to get the home crowd. I mean, the home crowd will be up for it from the start, but you want to make sure that they're seeing something that they can continue to get behind, because that's where Like if you get 20, 25 minutes into the game and you've not had a shot, then that's where kind of the atmosphere, then everyone kind of starts to slump a little bit, and it's like, oh, 35 minutes in, I'll go down and have a pint because this isn't going anywhere, and that sort of thing. And it's so, yeah, it's important for like the team's intensity to remain as high as we can possibly keep it. Because as soon as we drop off, then Leicester can get a foothold in the game, and that's where, when Leicester control games, I mean, certainly last season when they were able to control games, they could just pick teams off as soon as a team that was behind tried to kind of make any sort of press on. They've got so much pace up front and in wide areas that you just get torn to pieces. And we found, I mean, the game at St Mary's was ludicrous in that second half. The counter attacks that, and I mean, to be honest, we got away with it only being 4-1 in many ways in that second half. But yeah, the crowd's going to be, as ever, is going to be really important, and we just got to stick at it. And I think the Ipswich game won't have put people off, because I think people will take that in the context that it was largely a good performance. That unfortunately they've pinged one in the top corner via a massive deflection in the 96th minute. These things happen, unfortunately, to Ipswich more often than not. But yeah, we're just going to have to, as I say, keep at it, and with a bit of luck, we'll finally have some of that luck go our way for once.
What sort of team are we expecting to see, Reedy? Is he pretty settled with his starting 11? I've not been over it all, to be honest.
No, to be honest. I think that's another reason why a lot of fans are criticising Cooper, because, like I say, last season you had Mavididi on one wing, Fatu on the other. And then kind of, like I say, Dewsbury Hall was in that type of 10 role before, but now we've got a few other options now. But he always seems to change the winger situation every game. Either it's AU on the wing with Mavididi on the other side, or it's AU on one wing and Fatu on the other side. But Fatu's barely seen the light of day this year since he's signed permanently, which I think, in my opinion, is criminal for a really young player like that. He needs to get more game time and get used to the league. His first game wasn't great, but again, you can't just drop him for that. But with the rest of the team, he's starting to settle now. The back four is basically what it is, with Christiansen, JJ, Faze and Akoli, the new signing. And then in midfield, there's a few new signings from this year that have started to see the game time as well, with Skip coming in. Winks got a drop yesterday, which was quite surprising, but it obviously did help because we got the win. And then Ndidi, which again, he's been put into that 10 role like he was last year, and I just don't think he suits that. But I think Cooper does prefer to see someone more defensive in that more attacking role in a sense, to make sure we're not going all out attacking away. So yeah, like I said, the team's starting to settle, but there is still a few changes here and there every game.
And obviously, we're still... Go on.
No, I was just to say that the goal yesterday was scored by Onuachu. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, and that looked a fantastic goal when he was involved in other sort of like long runs deep into the heart of the Bournemouth defence. So I assume he's coming off one wing, and yesterday it was Mavididi off the other. Because we were linked with him, I think, but it was one of those that never really got off the ground. I know you get, clubs like Saints and Leicester always get linked with the same sort of kind of players because of the size of the clubs and whatnot. So how, does he start every week? Because he looked terrifyingly dangerous, I have to say.
It's a difficult one because we've obviously signed a new attacking minded midfielder as well in El Canouse for £25 million, £20 million, and he's only had one chance in the team. He didn't have the best performance against Everton, so Buonanotte did come in. But like I say, the majority of the games at the moment, indeed, he's been in that role. Just I think majority of the time because of the defensive side of it. But when we see Buonanotte in that starting 11 on the socials, we all like are a lot more confident in games, like you say, because he knows what he can bring to that team. And people say don't fall in love with a lone player, because the annoying thing is we can't buy him at the end of the season. That is the problem. And that's why, in my opinion, I'd much prefer to see the signing we did bring in on a permanent deal to have more game time, because he is the one staying into the club at the end of the season. So, but like you said, Buonanotte is something different than what we've seen since Maddison anyway.
And we're obviously still going to be playing out from the back, and we've been prone to a mistake here or there. Are we going to see Leicester kind of pressing us and getting at us a bit early? Is that the style they're playing, or is it going to be similar to last season, do you think?
It's very different. Again, we always seem to have one good 45 minutes, either it was in the first half or second half. Last game it was in the first half. Against Spurs it was in the second half. There's always one half that we seem to do better in. So I couldn't tell you if we're going to be good from the start or if we're going to be good from the second half. So, but the way we play is still kind of possession based, but it's just in my eyes it's not as calculated it was with Enzo, because he knew the passing around the back was going to lead to something in the end. Whereas this year, it just doesn't feel like it's going to come. It just feels like if it will come. So, yeah, I couldn't say if we're going to come at you from the start.
It's a really interesting insight into what might happen if you do change your manager, when you've got a philosophy and a style that the whole club and everybody's bought into. So just your expectations for the season, Reedy, because I know last year the three promoted clubs went back down and bookies' favourites this year. I mean, we've got Wolves and Everton that are a bit of an unknown as well. Is it the same as us, kind of finish 17th and you'll be happy?
Yes, I think, like I say, even if it was on Golden for the 17th, I wouldn't care, to be honest. But with the next 3 or 4 fixtures, like I said, that's coming up, I think if we do get the wins or the points that we want to get, then I could see us honestly getting a bit more close to the mid-table, just because I feel like once you get them points in it, for instance, if we say to get 6 points out of the next 3, then we're obviously already at that kind of relegation area, which obviously takes the pressure off us and hopefully gives us a bit more of a chance to play more free-flowing football and hopefully get a few more points on the board. So I'd say as long as we don't get relegated, that's fine by me. But I think if we can get a few more points in the next couple of games, I think we could get closer to 15th, 14th, that around there.
You could be off and running. Going to get some score predictions as well, Reedy, so I'll ask you for yours in just a moment. Anything else on Leicester, chaps? Are we kind of nervous? Are we optimistic? How are we feeling about this?
Well, I mean, obviously we're nervous because the magnitude of the game is as such that you have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it is huge, and there's so much pressure on it, not only for the whole season, but for the management and for the players. You don't really want to pin all your hopes on one game, but when you don't win in 7, that's what you end up doing. So yeah, obviously nervous because it's huge.
Let's get some score predictions then, shall we? Reedy, I'll ask you first. Guests always go first. I mean, you got your first win at the weekend, so feeling confident? How do you reckon it's going to pan out?
I wouldn't say feeling confident, because I think in a way you're needing the winners more than us at the moment, because again, I think you've not got a win yet, so you need it more than us. But I feel confident saying, because of the win yesterday, I do think we're going to have a good chance in getting a result against you. I will be there, so hopefully it'll be a 9-0 again, but it's not going to be the case. It's not going to be the case. I know it's not. But I'll say a 2-1 win for Leicester.
A 2-1 win for Leicester, right? Nice one, Steve.
Oh, God knows. Yeah, genuinely no idea. I mean, this is one of those games where if we turn up and play, if we put in the sort of performances in terms of being organised and having a game plan and kind of working to that game plan, as we did for the most part against Ipswich and for the most part yesterday against Arsenal, even though we obviously lost the game, then I've got confidence that we can finally get over the line. The problem is the sort of 15-20 minute periods that we do have in these games, even when we play well, where we look like we're all at sea and we get overrun. And if Leicester have got more clinical finishing than some of the other sides we've played in these games so far this season, then that spells trouble for us. I saw Vardy shanked a one-on-one almost out for a throw-in yesterday, which was absolutely extraordinary. So more of that, please. But he's always had a decent record against us, and of course for injuring our star players too. So would like to keep him a little bit quiet for once. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest, I don't see us keeping a clean sheet.
No.
But at the same time, I do think we'll score. We scored against best defence in the league last season, so why not Why not again this time? So I'm going to reverse Reedy's score and go for a 2-1 win.
Nice. Glenn, do you think this will be the first win of the season?
I think so. Like, as I said the other day, I manifest these wins, and it doesn't happen usually. But no, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do the same this week. I think, we do need the win more than them. It will bring hopefully a bit more focus and a little bit more resolve to our play, and it's just a case of doing it for 90 minutes. I think we've seen this season at various times that we can be a good team with the right players on the pitch, the right formation, the right mindset. Obviously, we've got to cut out the defensive errors, because that just kills you when you don't score many goals like we do.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping, looking at Leicester's team, I think the defence you can get at, a massive part of the game is going to be the midfield. And it'll probably be Downs and Aribo. Can they dominate the game? But we can't afford to. I mean, when we lost at home to Leicester last year, that was a Russell Martin disaster. That was when he started. He decided to play inverted fullbacks, and Walker Peters was in midfield. Smallbone was at right back, and we gave away. I think we had a go at giving away 3 goals in the first 5 minutes. If we turn up and do something like that, then there's no hope for us. But we've got to think that Russell Martin's going to get it right, and the players are going to carry it out and not do anything stupid. So I'm going to say the same as Steve, 2-1 win.
2-1 win. And Alfie, just to complete the set.
Yeah, I think in adding on to Glenn, I mean, doing it for 90 minutes, I think it's also a case of doing it when the pressure's really on. And they have done it previously under Russell Martin. Of course, they have in the playoffs and in other games last season. But this season, obviously, you look at Nottingham Forest at home and you think, first home game of the season, should have got something out of Newcastle. And, it's the flattest performance we've seen. You think about Bournemouth, all right, it's a bit of a rivalry, but it's also going into a bit of a bear pit in terms of the way that they play and aggressive pressing, and completely fucked that as well. Sorry for the language, I just couldn't think of a more eloquent word. And now the pressure's on in the case of, all right, they've done well once again against a big team. They've shown that they've got talented players and they can stick to a game plan. Now they've got to do it in front of their fans in a game which really matters. And again, does the fog roll in? Or do they handle it? That's the big question mark. But I mean, I think it's probably going to be a TSP first, because I'm also going to go for a 2-1 win.
Wow.
Jesus.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Just for a bit of context, I think there were a couple of people that got it right. 4 people with 3 points in the prediction league this week. There are only 7 people with no points at all. So maybe
am I one of them?
yeah, I can.
Who's predicting us to win every game then?
Yeah, exactly. Reedy, thanks for coming on. Really great to catch up with you, and hopefully maybe we'll speak to you a bit later in the season as well before the other game.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers for the invite, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers, bud. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers.
The other reason we need to win is, I don't know if you saw the stat today, we've now matched our worst ever top flight run, going, I think it's 20 matches without a win for the first time since 1969. So
three players kind of from that team from the previous relegation season. So you're comparing apples with oranges. That's the thing with that.
I agree.
Obviously, Ben Diaz is on a similar run though with a different team, and so maybe make it up to 4.
Something's got to give. Something's got to give. That's for sure.
Mean, the other thing about predicting a 2-1 win is I feel like at this point we have bigger problems than getting 0 points in the prediction league if they fail to win. So I feel like it's sort of just trying to speak into existence.
We've got to try everything, haven't we? If you are watching live, don't forget to put your predictions into the comments section, just so we can take a look at those as well. You can follow the Total Saints podcast on all the usual social media platforms. Just have a search for @TotalSaintsPod. That's where you'll find us. And don't forget to check out the merch store as well. It's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. There's loads of nice little bits getting added all the time. So have a look at that over the international break if you're missing the football. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's what I was talking about at the start. heart. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. Each of the tiers on there comes with different perks. There's weekly shout outs for patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, and James Kibbe. They're all in the Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrop, Matt Hall, Mark Littlewood, Mike Etheridge, James Bobin, and John Bevan, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you to Paul Castle Associates and to Steamtown Brewery for sponsoring TSP this season. Thank you to Steve, Glenn, and Alfie. Enjoy the international break. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.